Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series, reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as read by Lord Naren White. Chapter 26. Well, when they was all gone, the king he asks Mary Jane how they was off for spare rooms, and she said she had one spare room which would do for Uncle William, and she'd give her own room to Uncle Harvey, which was a little bigger, and she would turn into the room with her sisters and sleep on a cot, and up garret was a little cubby with a pallet in it. The king said the cubby would do for his valley, meaning me. So Mary Jane took us up, and she showed them their rooms, which was plain but nice. She said she'd have her frocks and a lot of other traps took out of her room if they was in Uncle Harvey's way, but he said they weren't. The frocks was hung along the wall, and before them was a curtain made out of calico that hung down to the floor. There was an old hair trunk in one corner, and a guitar box in another, and all sorts of little knickknacks and gimcracks around, like girls brisken up a room with. The king said it was all the more homely and more pleasanter for these fixings, and so don't disturb them. The duke's room was pretty small, but plenty good enough, and so was my cubby. That night they had a big supper, and all the men and women was there, and I stood behind the king and the duke's chairs and waited on them, and the blacks waited on the rest. Mary Jane, she sat at the head of the table, with Susan alongside her, and said how bad the biscuits was, and how mean the preserves was, and how ornery and tough the fried chickens was, and all that kind of rot, the way women always do for to force out compliments, and the people all knowed everything was tip-top, and said, how do you get biscuits to brown so nice? And, where for the land's sakes did you get these amazing pickles? And all that kind of humbug talky talk, just the way people always does at a supper, you know. And when it was all done, me and the hare lip had supper in the kitchen off of their leavings, whilst the others was helping the blacks clean up the things. The hare lip she got to pumping me about England, and blessed if I didn't think the ice was getting mighty thin sometimes. She says, did you ever see the king? Who? William the Fourth? Why, I bet I have. He goes to our church. I knowed he was dead years ago, but I never let on. So when I say he goes to our church, she says, what, regular? Yes, regular. His pew's over opposite ourn, on the other side the pulpit. I thought he lived in London. Well, he does. Where would he live? But I thought you lived in Sheffield. I see I was up a stump. I had to let on to get choked with a chicken bone, so as to get time to think how to get down again. Then I says, I mean, he goes to our church regular when he's in Sheffield. That's only in the summertime, and when he comes there to take the sea baths. Why, how do you talk? Sheffield ain't on the sea. Well, who said it was? Why, you did. I didn't know. You did. I didn't. You did. I never said nothing of the kind. Well, what did you say then? Said he'd come and take the sea baths, that's what I said. Well then, how's he going to take sea baths if he ain't on the sea? Looky here, I says. Did you ever see any Congress water? Yes. Well, did you have to go to Congress to get it? Why, no. Well, neither does William IV have to go to sea to get a sea bath. How does he get it then? Gets in the way people down here gets Congress water. In barrels. Then in the palace at Sheffield they got furnaces, and he wants his water hot. They can't bile that amount of water away off there at the sea. They haven't got no conveniences for it. Oh, I see now. You might have said that in the first place and saved time. When she said that, I see I was out of the woods again, and so I was comfortable and glad. Next, she says, do you go to church too? Yes, regular. Where do you sit? Why, in our pew. Whose pew? Why, ourn, your Uncle Harvey's. His'n? What does he want with the pew? Wanted to set in. What did you reckon he wanted with it? Why, I thought he'd be in the pulpit. Rot him. I forgot he was a preacher. I see I was up a stump again, so I played another chicken bone and got another think. Then I says, blame it, do you suppose there ain't but one preacher to a church? Why, What do they want with more? What? To preach before a king? I never did see such a girl as you. They don't have no less than 17. 17? My land! Why, I wouldn't set out such a string as that. Not if I never got to glory. It must take 'em a week. Shucks. They don't all of 'em preach the same day, only one of 'em. Well then, what does the rest of 'em do? Oh, nothing much. Loll around, pass the plate, and one thing or another, but mainly they don't do nothing. Well then, what are they for? Why, they're for style. Don't you know nothing? Well, I don't want to know no foolishness as that. How's our servants treated in England? Do they treat 'em better than we treat our blacks? No, a servant ain't nobody there. They treat 'em worse than dogs. Don't they give 'em holidays the way we do? Christmas and New Year's week and 4th of July? Oh, just listen. A body could tell you ain't never been to England by that. Why, Harold? Why, Joanna? They never see a holiday from year's end to year's end. Never go to the circus, nor theatre, nor black shows, nor nowheres. Nor church, nor church. But you always went to church. Well, I was gone up again. I forgot I was the old man's servant. But, next minute, I whirled in on a kind of an explanation how a valley was different from a common servant, and had to go to church, whether he wanted to or not, and set with the family on account of its being the law. But I didn't do it pretty good, and when I got done I see she warn't satisfied. She says, "Honest Injun now, ain't you been telling me a lot of lies?" "Honest Injun," says I. "None of it at all. None of it at all. Not a lie in it," says I. "Lay your hand on this book and say it." I see it warn't nothing but a dictionary, so I laid my hand on it and said. So then she looked a little better satisfied and says, "Well then, I'll believe some of it, but I hope to gracious if I'll believe the rest." "What is it you won't believe, Joe?" says Mary Jane, stepping in with Susan behind her. "It ain't right nor kind for you to talk so to him. And him a stranger and so far from his people. How would you like to be treated so?" "There's always your way, ma'am. Always sailing in to help somebody before they're hurt. I ain't done nothing to him. He's told some stretchers, I reckon, and I said I wouldn't swallow it all, and that's every bit and grain, I did say. I reckon he can stand a little thing like that, can't he? I don't care whether 'twas little or whether 'twas big. He's here in our house and a stranger, and it wasn't good of you to say it. If you was in his place, it would make you feel ashamed, and so you ought not to say a thing to another person that will make them feel ashamed. Why, ma'am, he said, it don't make no difference what he said. That ain't the thing. The thing is for you to treat him kind, and not be saying things to make him remember he ain't in his own country and amongst his own folks." I says to myself, this is a girl, that I'm letting the old reptile rob of her money. Then Susan, she waltzed in, and if you'll believe me, she did give hare lip hark from the tomb. Says I to myself, and this is another one, that I'm letting her rob her of her money. Then Mary Jane, she took another inning, and went in sweet and lovely again, which was her way, but when she got done there warn't hardly anything left of poor hare lip, so she hollered on. "All right then," says the other girls, "you just ask her his pardon." She done it too, and she done it beautiful. She done it so beautiful it was good to hear, and I wished I could tell her 1,000 lies, so she could do it again. I says to myself, this is another one that I'm letting him rob her of her money. And when she's got through, they all just laid themselves out to make me feel home, and know I was among friends. And I felt so ornery and low down and mean that I says to myself, my mind's made up. I'll hive that money for them or bust. So then I lit out for bed, I said, meaning some time or another. When I got by myself, I went to thinking the thing over. I says to myself, shall I go to that doctor, private, and blow on these frauds? No, that won't do. He might tell me who told him, then the king and the duke would make it warm for me. Shall I go private and tell Mary Jane? No. I dasn't do that. Her face would give them a hint, sure, and they've got the money, and they slid right out and get away with it. If she was to fetch Aiden help, I'd get mixed up in the business before it was done with, I judge. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.